Hello everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Nick from Australia and welcome to the World Club Challenge review between Hull KR and the Broncos. What a fantastic game, man. Holy crap, really enjoyable. The second half in particular was very entertaining, really enjoyable match of just Hull KR and the Broncos, man. They really put on a good battle, man. Like, yeah, Hull KR dominated most of the game, but the Broncos, they just wouldn't give up there, especially towards the end, where they nearly pulled off an unbelievable miracle comeback. Would have been some sort of story if they won that. Hope everyone's doing well. Apologies about the delay. We were supposed to start on here about half an hour ago, but we had some technical problems, so I think we're good for now. So fingers crossed, but not going to waste too much of everyone's time. I know it's 11 a.m. on a Friday morning here in Australia, so not expecting the biggest crowd at this time of the day. Everyone's probably still at work and whatnot, but Hull KR versus Brisbane, we might as well talk about it, man. So like Hull KR going into this game, I obviously had a shock round one loss in the Super League last week against the York City Knights, and a lot of people thought that they were not going to be any chance of winning because they were beaten by one of the worst teams last week in Super League. But you got to understand, I don't think one bad game is going to throw Hull KR off. Hull KR last week, they played their round one game. They obviously had their mind focused on the Broncos, and I think we all knew that Hull KR would be a lot better this week, and they were. They started really well. They scored 3 tries in the opening 20 minutes. They were on fire early on. And the one thing about Hull KR that you got to give them credit for is they had no fear. Like I've seen teams over the last 10 years in the World Club Challenge where they will, some of the Super League clubs will be a bit nervous going into it. Hull KR for me didn't really show that. They didn't show that fear factor up against an NRL side, and they just handled everything really well. Like I remember watching a few World Club challenges where the Rabbitohs put almost I think they beat Saints 39-0 one year. Then the Cowboys put a score on Leeds, and I also remember Leeds going to Melbourne and getting absolutely hammered down there. So there's been teams over the years that have taken on the NRL and just haven't had what it takes to win. But Hull KR and obviously St. Helens and Wigan over the last couple of years, they haven't had that fear factor. So it was good to see Hull KR just play for rugby league and not be worried about who their opponent is. They handled it really well. Well, yeah, it was just an incredible start, man. Tomamone going over for the first try. Not many people would have predicted that one. Then you had Minchella. I thought Minchella was actually held up. I wasn't exactly sure if he got the ball down, but a bit hard to overturn that. One. And Joe Burgess scored an awesome try. Great kick by I think it was Jez Litton. Fantastic try there. Gildar went over. Peter Hiku went over. They were on fire, Hull KR, man. They were on fire. They led 18 points to 4 at half time. And it was pretty incredible, to be honest. Then obviously the second half started. Gildar went in and then Hiku went in. Hull KR were leading 30 points to 4. Now, if you'd have told me that was going to happen, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have said, okay, Hull KR, they could lead by a couple of tries, but I didn't think they would lead 30 to 4. It was quite incredible. And then Brisbane made a comeback. Patrick Carrigan went over in the 60th minute. A very nice try from him. Dean Mariner went over in the corner as well. Shibasaki went in off a nice ball from Reece Walsh. And then Staggs went over out wide, which made the contest very interesting. Now, when Dean Mariner scored, and it was back to 30 to, what was it 30 to 16, 30 to 14, thought to myself, oh, here we go. Here we go. Game on, 30 to 16, plenty of time. Brisbane actually scored 3 tries in 5 minutes. Carrigan, Mariner, Shibasaki. And then Shibasaki almost had a hat trick, but he ended up dropping the ball. It was pretty hard for him to regather it. And then obviously Staggs went over, and we had a grandstand finish there. And then I think the Broncos, I think Ezra Mann, I think he knocked on from memory. And then whole KR, right? Mikey Lewis ends up putting a chip over the top. I don't know what he was thinking. It ended up, Reece Walsh ended up catching it on the full. They ended up running to the left-hand side. Like, mind you, they're still 70 meters away from the try line. He throws a pass to, I think it was Karapani. He ended up dropping the ball. They had an opportunity there, Brisbane. There were some numbers there for them, but it just wasn't to be. You know, the Broncos, they love a comeback. And, you know, we saw in the finals last year, they came back from 16 against Canberra to win the game. They came back against 14 against Penrith, and they came back against 10 against Melbourne. So they were the comeback kings, but for them to be down 30 to 4, get it back to 30 to 26 or 30 to 24 with 2 minutes to go. They nearly pulled off an unbelievable comeback once again. But the thing with Brisbane is, I think, because they didn't play any trial games, I think it does make a difference. It really does. Like, you look at Hull KR, they had one full preseason game. They had a full game last week in round 1, which obviously they were a bit underdone and they didn't play well. So Hull KR had 2 games going into it. One game mattered because it was round 1. The other game was just a preseason game. Brisbane didn't have any preseason games going into it. They actually elected not to have a preseason game. I do believe they had a little hit out against London, and they did train with Hull FC, but I don't actually believe they had a preseason game. So, you know, they were a little bit underdone, but to be fair, the Broncos, they have been in England for a week, and they had plenty of time to prepare for this. And I think what everyone needs to understand, whether people want to admit this or not, I've been saying this for a number of years now, the top 2 Super League teams, they can give the top NRL sides a good crack. You've got to have a look at what's happened the last couple of years. St. Helens, when they had their dynasty, they went down to Penrith at Penrith Stadium, and they actually beat Penrith in a Golden Point game. That was unbelievable. I remember being there for it. It was insane. You had Wigan, who actually beat Penrith last year over there in the UK in another incredible game. And then now Hull KR, obviously they did the treble last year. They won the League Shield, which was the minor premiership. They come first. They won the Challenge Cup last year and the grand final. And now they win the World Club Challenge by beating the Broncos. So Hull KR, Wigan, and St. Helens, they are the 3 sides that have proven they can compete with the NRL teams like the Panthers and the Broncos. They have proven it now, and I think it's great. You know, obviously with the World Club Challenge, it's obviously the NRL Grand Final versus Super League Grand Final winners. I would like to see some other games added that weekend. You know, bring back this NRL versus Super League weekend. Like, for example, Hull KR versus the Broncos. That can be the last game and the main game of the weekend. But you could have, say, the Melbourne Storm versus St. Helens. Or you could have the Wigan Warriors versus, say, the Penrith Panthers or whatever. But it's just incredible, man. It's just incredible. I think that'd be great if they were to do that once again. We've got some idiot spamming in the chat. See ya, bud. Don't have time for losers. But as Champa says in the live chat, this proves that Super League teams can compete with the best of the NRL. I've always been critical about them, but they have earned my respect. I don't think every Super League team can compete with NRL. I just think it's the top team. So Saints, Wigan, Hull KR, and maybe Leeds. They're probably the four that can compete. We should have they should have a weekend of that. Like you have Hull KR versus Brisbane. I don't know, Leeds versus the Roosters, Wigan versus Penrith, St. Helens versus Melbourne. I think they should do it. I think it'd be outstanding. But back to this game, when it was 30-4, people were turning it off and saying it's all over. And then Brisbane made a bit of a comeback. They scored 4 tries in 16 minutes, and we had a grandstand finish. Really enjoyable game. Really enjoyable. Couple of the standout performances. Now, obviously, Jez Litton won the player of the match. Now, one thing I want to mention about Hull KR, I've got to give them credit for this. They lost their fullback, Arthur Morg, who was actually probably in Hull KR's top 4 players before halftime. Arthur Morg went off injured before halftime, and they had to reshuffle the team. Mikey Lewis, who is their best half, he went to fullback. Jez Litton, who's their hooker, he went to the halves with Tyrone May. And Kyle Lawton went to hooker. And Hull KR still did a fair job. So credit to them, man, for adapting like that. No one's going to talk about it. When you lose a fullback and then you put your half, who won a Man of Steel 2 years ago, to fullback, and then you're switching your hooker to the halves, and then you're bringing on Kyle Lawton to hooker. It's not an easy gig, and they could have easily collapsed right there and then Brisbane could have won, but they dug deep and they did very well to handle that. Now, a couple of players who I thought performed really well. I thought Dane Hadley for Hull KR was outstanding. I thought Joe Burgess was great. Tyrone May had a really good game. Minchella and Monet were very good. I thought Batchelor was also very good in the back row. Defensively, Peter Hickey was terrible, but attack-wise, very solid. Scored a nice try off a grubber kick. As for Brisbane, I know Reece Walsh had some good and bad moments, but I thought he was very dangerous for the Broncos. He may not have had the best game, but he was arguably the most dangerous player on the field for them. Carrigan was very solid. Shibasaki, outstanding. Probably their best player. Shibasaki and Paddy Carrigan, probably the Broncos' best players. Jordan Ricky, actually, Jordan Ricky was actually quite good. Who else was there? Mariner was solid. I don't want to be too critical of Ezra Mann because it's their first game, but he was terrible, man. He just wouldn't pass the ball. I don't know what Ezra Mann was doing out there. He had stupid kicks. He wouldn't pass the ball. Bit of a ball hog. I don't know what the go was there, but his performance was one to forget. That is for sure. But yeah, great game of footy, man, and I think Hull KR deserved the win. Really enjoyable game. Obviously, my player of the game was Jez Litton. Thought he was probably their best. If I had to give a second, I'd go probably Shibasaki, and then I'd go Dean Hadley. So 3-2-1, with one being the best, I'd go Dean Hadley at 3, Shibasaki at 2, and Jez Litton at number 1 for player of the game. But, all right, that's going to wrap it up, guys. Thanks for watching the World Club Challenge review. Hull KR, World Club, they are World Champions, World Club Champions. Well done to Hull KR. And thanks for watching, everyone. And I'll see you guys in the next one.